Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today we're making cauliflower crust pizza, and this was a special request from my partner. To start this dish, we're going to do a homemade pizza sauce. So to a small saucepan, I'm adding 15 ounces of tomato sauce. I'm using low sodium so I can control the salinity in this. 6 ounces of tomato paste. A small bunch of fresh basil. And a couple sprigs of fresh thyme. To this, we're going to add a half of a teaspoon of garlic powder, 3 tablespoons of Italian seasoning or dried oregano, basil, whatever you have, a half of a teaspoon of onion powder, and 1 teaspoon of sugar because pizza sauce tends to be a little sweet. We're going to just heat this on low until all those flavors come together. And at this point, we should be preheating our oven to 375 degrees as well. Now for the crust itself, I have a 2.5 pound head of cauliflower, just pulling off those outer leaves, and then just removing all of those florets from the core of our cauliflower. And you should end up with this porcupine looking core. Now I'm chopping off any of that excess stem, but I'm saving that because I'll stir fry that or make a soup with it. Then we're going in and breaking up the florets. We are going to pulse this in a food processor, but we want to give that motor a little help. So any of those large stems, I just have a little container that I'm storing them in. Now we want to pulse this in batches because again, our motor needs a little help. I have an older food processor, so I don't want to overwork it. So just working in batches at a time. We're just going to pulse this until this becomes the consistency of rice. Now you can definitely buy this pre-made in the grocery store, but it does tend to be a little expensive and you don't get that much. So I thought this would be a more cost-effective way of doing this. Once we pulsed up all of our cauliflower, I have a large cookie sheet that I've lined with parchment paper. And we want to spread this out as evenly as possible. We want to cook some of that moisture out. I know some people boil their cauliflower when they're making cauliflower rice, but to me that just introduces more water, so this makes more sense. So we're just going to bake this in the oven at 375 for 15 minutes. Just to draw out some of that moisture. At this point, our pizza sauce should be done. I've just taken this off the stove. I'm going to let this come to room temperature. For the crust, we also need 1/4 cup of grated parmesan cheese. So I'm just grating this over the smallest holes of my box grater. We also need 1/4 cup of shredded mozzarella. I did buy the prepackaged one this time because it tends to be a little drier, and that's what I want. I don't want to introduce moisture to the dough. We're trying to bake that out right now. So go with the pre-shredded, and 1/4 cup of this as well. And we can set this aside until we're ready to add it to our dough. Now for the toppings, I'm going full vegetarian here. We really enjoy onions, peppers, mushrooms, and black olives on our pizza. But use whatever toppings speak to you. Use pepperoni, sausage. It doesn't matter. It's totally up to your taste. So I'm just chopping the onion into a nice little dice, slicing up our little mushrooms here. Bell peppers are going to add a nice little crunch. So just taking off the top and bottom and just removing the core and seeds. And we're going to cut this up into a nice dice as well. And the lovely thing about making homemade pizzas, you can add as much or as little as you want as far as toppings and cheese to your pizza. And you can really customize it to your taste. Last but not least, I'm going to slice up some black olives, and these are the canned ones. These aren't fancy. We also need some more cheese. So I have some low moisture mozzarella that I'm chopping into slices, but I'm going to tear this when I add this to the top of the pizza. And that's all of our toppings. So it's been 15 minutes. We can take out our cauliflower rice and we're going to let this cool completely. Once it's cooled down, I'm going to tip this out either onto a tea towel or a cheesecloth, whatever you have on hand, because there's still a lot of moisture left in this cauliflower. And we want to squeeze as much of that out as possible because we don't want a soggy dough. So just gathering up all the ends of my tea towel, grabbing a small bowl, you could do this right over the sink, and just start squeezing as much of that moisture out as possible. You're going to be surprised how much water is left in this cauliflower. This is a good way to get out some stress or frustration. It's a good arm workout. And you can see how much water we've gotten out of there. Now to form our dough, we need 1 room temperature egg. To this, we are going to add in 1/2 teaspoon of dried basil, 1/2 teaspoon of dried oregano, 1/8 of a teaspoon of salt, and 1/4 of a teaspoon of black pepper. Mix that all together until the egg is beaten up, and then we can add in our riced cauliflower and our 1/2 cup of combined cheeses. I'm going to start mixing this with a spatula at first, just until the egg gets absorbed into our cheese and our cauliflower. And then on that same baking sheet with a fresh piece of parchment, I'm going to glove up because we are using raw egg. Sprinkling with a little olive oil. And we're going to tip out our cauliflower dough. I should have mentioned before, you want to raise your oven temperature at this point to 450 degrees. And we're going to just start forming this into a pizza dough shape. Now, you don't want this to be too thick or too thin. You don't want it to be too thick because you want this to bake through, and you don't want it to be too thin because you don't want it to fall apart. So I found 1/4 inch worked out perfectly for this. And you want this to be as even as possible. So just keep pressing and forming until you get a nice even circle, because you want this to bake evenly. And we are going to bake this in the oven at 450 degrees Fahrenheit for 20 minutes until it gets to be a nice, beautiful golden brown. Perfect. Let's pop this in the oven. We are going to flip this, so stay tuned. So it's been 20 minutes. You can see our crust is beautiful and golden. I'm just layering over another piece of parchment, taking a larger sheet pan, putting my oven mitts on because that pan is hot, praying to the pizza gods. We are going to flip this over, and we almost lost it, but we did not. We saved it. So giving this a couple little shakes so that dough gets back onto our parchment, and popping this back onto the hot pan. Now let's start building our pizza. We want a thin layer of our pizza sauce. We don't want this to be soggy. If I was using a normal pizza dough, I would sprinkle a little olive oil on first, but this is baked on olive oil, so it should be fine. So a thin layer of pizza sauce. And now adding in a little bit more of that shredded low moisture mozzarella. And all of our other toppings. And again, customize this to your taste. Are you a meat lover? Do a supreme pizza. Do you just like cheese? Leave all this off. It's completely up to you. And then our slab mozzarella, we're going to rip that up and put that on top as well. And we're going to bake this until the cheese is golden and bubbly. Now we're going to add a little basil because that just adds a nice freshness to the top of our pizza. Now I'm using a rocker cutter because I found this is the best way to cut pizza. It doesn't roll off all of your toppings as you're rolling through. So we're just going to cut this up into portions. And let's see if this is going to hold together when we take off a slice. And I'm kind of shocked that it did. This tastes, it's not really cauliflower forward. I think because we added the cheese and the eggs into the dough, it changed the flavor of the crust. This is a great alternative for a healthy version of pizza dough. I have never made this before. I'm kind of shocked at how tasty this is. But this is definitely a win-win. I will be making this again. And I've got to say, when I gave this to my partner, he absolutely loved it. That mozzarella is stretchy and wonderful. You get all those nice fresh veggies on top. But there it is, cauliflower crust pizza. I hope you all try to make this. Thank you so much for watching. If you liked this video, give it a like. If you loved it, subscribe and hit that notification bell because I put out new videos every Thursday. Thank you again, and until next time, happy cooking. It would help if I plugged it in, huh?